Who has heard the phrase moral injury? What is it? How can it impact you? And who is out there that even can explain it? Well, I'll tell you who's out there. Karen Hurley. So Karen Hurley is our guest today. Karen, thank you for coming to the Interstate.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate you taking the time and having this conversation today.
So this sounds very new. I am not very familiar with it. Moral injury. Karen,
Yes.
please share with us, what is moral injury?
Yeah, so it was deemed through the American Psychological Association as a disorder the end of 2024. So, moral injury, in a nutshell, is just when you have experienced decisions or organizational behavior that feels like it's against what you value. And over time, you can experience an injury and it can get so egregious as it can be actually moral trauma. And so I work primarily with first responders where they are extremely exposed to horrific events on a daily basis over their career, which is about 20-25 years. However,
Mhm.
this is extremely translatable into other high stress professionals. And so the work that I do is really reconnecting with our purpose and then tools so that you're not getting injured over decisions that sometimes are out of your control.
So, what differentiates moral injury versus something like losing out on opportunity because of corporate politics? What's the difference between, do you get what I mean?
Yes, I do. So I have a sales career. So I worked in a big, huge industry for many years, a big corporation. And being in sales, it's a really interesting job, right? You have a lot of autonomy. However, over time, there were sometimes situations where I could have done things that weren't as ethical in order to meet my goals, right? Because I'm
Right.
paid as a commission-based salesperson to make a number. Over the years, I worked with people who made questionable decisions, and oftentimes I followed them in their territories and had to really garner and clean up some things, right? With clients, sometimes it was in-house with other people that we work with to service our accounts. Over the years, that became difficult for me, because nobody's watching. And so I could have made questionable decisions to make the sale so that I could get paid.
Right.
And then when you couple that with being pipped, right? Because typically in a commission based sales job, you have 90 days. If you are not hitting your numbers within 90 days, you are pipped.
Yeah,
And so it can really create some situations where that devil on your shoulder sounds like a good idea.
that's right. And just for anyone who might not know, that is a performance improvement plan.
Thank you.
The
Yeah,
PIPT. Yeah, right. So it's working in a situation where you're exposed to that and it just is almost like a repeated temptation and feeling in a precarious position for an extended period of time.
exactly. Over time. And then I worked with lawyers for many years as well, over 25 years. And so I saw that with them as well, right? Because lawyers are not there to take an oath, right? They're there to represent their clients based on the facts that they have and which side they represent. Yeah, but they take an oath, right?
Right.
So there's a level of sometimes when you're representing your clients, you need to do something in order to do that to the best of your ability. However, it may be against your moral compass and what you value. And again, over time, that can create an injury. And so that's where we're seeing is if we don't have tools and we're not really egregiously unpacking that over time, it can create some issues.
How do people realize that they may have suffered from this?
I think it's a lot of things. It can start off with burnout. I think that's really huge here too, where you're dreading going to work on Monday.
Mhm.
I used to get the Sunday night blues, like, oh,
Right.
here we go. So, even though I loved what I did, it sucked the life out of me,
Right.
for a while. And I was like, you know, it's great when you're hitting your numbers, but you have to dig really deep when you're not.
Yes.
It can also look like lack of direction and purpose, right? Something that used to light you up, and you're like, I don't know. And then sometimes we get stuck because we've invested so much time in this career that we don't really see how we could pivot into something else. I know for
Mhm.
myself, I was due to a series of events, I separated from my company because I was
Mm.
there almost 15 years. And so there was a
Right.
level of like, this is what I know how to do. It's going to take a lot of effort to do something else, even though it wasn't really aligned with what I wanted to do anymore.
And you did make that bold move
Yes,
and founded more than one company, correct? You
exactly.
have founded, and I wanna focus on one first, it's PIF Samaritan Services,
Yes.
and that is where you are working in this field and really assisting people with this moral injury situation. Could you tell us what you're doing in Samaritan Services?
Yeah, so PIF Samaritan Services, I've kind of reimagined that over the years. I actually started that company in 2013, but I was
Mhm.
doing something different. And so when I started working as a first responder in the pandemic, that just kind of changed the trajectory of everything that I do. And I was still in school at the time. PIF stands for Pay It Forward. So,
Mhm.
how do I take what I know and my resources to help others? What I started to see is though, even my unit was based for the community, first responders can't like work virtually, So
Right, right, that's right.
it was like, oh, you can't, as a cop and a firefighter, kind of like be like, well, let me just dial into this.
Right, yeah.
So, what I started to do then was I help agencies, fire departments, sheriff's offices, police departments set up their wellness programs on a project basis. Because when you
Mhm.
understand that the average size of a police department in the United States is 9 sworn officers,
Mhm.
and 75% of the fire service in the United States is volunteer. The only
Right.
person who gets paid is the chief. So, with that, it falls often to the chief to help get resources and an actual program that can help their personnel be the best that they can possibly be when you call 911. You want those people to be having the best day possible on your worst day.
Yes, yes. So that is really critical and not always the case.
Exactly.
So the PIF Samaritan Services, you are working with organizations of all sizes and having a wellness program so that the people from dispatch, the 911 op to the people in the field, the EMTs, helicopter pilot, whomever it might be,
Yes.
or same, with police, that they're going to be in their best, not just, it's not from what I'm hearing you, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not the physical side, although that's part of it. It's to make sure that their mental wellness is going to be strong, on point, and they'll have resources and know that how to even monitor that for themselves so they can show up in their best
Absolutely, it's
and be
all of it.
their best.
So it can be physical. I do an
Mhm.
assessment based upon the International Chief of Police Association's wellness program best practices. So we start there and I take a look at what they're currently doing and then how do we fill in the gaps and then combined resources. A lot of times they don't even know what's right in their backyard. It could be free. We also look at data points so that they can have future funding because that's always an issue in public safety is how do we get the money we need to support our personnel through the city,
Right.
through the municipality. It could be a legacy, right? So chiefs sometimes don't have a succession plan. Oftentimes what I would hear is how'd you become chief? And he's like, well, nobody else kind of raised their hand, So I'm like, okay, are we thinking about your exit strategy, and your
Mhm.
legacy? So I'm never really sure exactly where we're going to go, but we take a look at physical, we look at mental, we look at do we have peer support, right? Are we supporting each other? Do we maybe have a mentorship program? Are we spiritually supporting ourselves? Because that's really where the moral injury comes in, because this is a
Mhm.
purpose filled, driven profession. You are called
Right.
to be a cop,
Right.
a firefighter, a dispatcher, right? You're holding everybody else's problems and being a professional fixer.
Mhm. And you work with people all over the United
I
States?
do. I
And
primarily work here
Mhm.
in Arizona, but I just came
Mhm.
back from the Utah Chief of Police Conference because they have some legislation that came under House Bill 23 in 2022. So over the last 4 years, I've been really trying to help them navigate what that looks like because it's mandated now. Here in Arizona, we have something called the Craig-Tiger Act, but unlike Utah, no funding came along with it. So we've been trying to, and this legislation came down in like 2018. It's been around a while. However, we're trying to figure out that out and navigate it. It's really hard to institute something when you don't have funding for it. So that's something we
Right.
also talk about is how do we use the donut money? Because people want to support their fire
Right.
department, their police department. Oftentimes they buy us donuts or pizza, and I'm
Mhm.
like, that's great. I love a free meal, but how do we maybe channel that money into something that could be really helpful for what we actually need within the agency?
Is that one of the projects that you're currently noodling on?
Yes, it really depends. Like I said, there's a lot of moving parts to this because
Mhm.
what are we currently doing now? But oftentimes, larger agencies have an advantage because oftentimes they have a foundation. So, like in Scottsdale, they have a police foundation. And through that, they can work with that foundation and help get some money for the initiatives that they want.
Right.
Most departments being so small, again, it's just some kind of nonprofit because
Right,
they
right.
can utilize, I call it being the bank, because they can funnel the money through the nonprofit to get to the initiatives that you would like the funding to go to.
So the other company I made mention that you launched not just one, you're the founder of, and I just love this name, Coaching with a Karen. So tell us a little more about Coaching with a Karen. What's that all about?
Yeah, so that's really where I work with folks too about moral injury because that's my
Mhm.
training business, that's my coaching business. So I work with teams, executive leaderships, and organizations.
Okay.
And oftentimes what that looks like is aligning not only with the individual's purpose, but also the organizational purpose. Because oftentimes, not oftentimes, we always have mission statements,
Right.
we always have mission statements, but are we really aligned to that? And what does that look like?
Right.
And then as you move up the chain, right? That's why executives, it's difficult because you don't have a lot of people to talk to. They say it's lonely at the top for a reason.
Right. Right.
And so it's sometimes just having that neutral person to noodle things through.
Right.
And one of the things is to have a big sense of humor, right? I cannot deny my name. I cannot
Right.
deny what I look like. What when this became a thing in the pandemic, my mother was
Yeah.
appalled. Appalled.
Right. I'm sure.
She's like,
I'm
"I
sure
love
she
that
was.
name and how dare
Yeah.
they?" And I said, "Mom, I've been getting memes since 2014. It just became
Right.
a thing."
Yeah. Yeah. You just are now aware of it. It's been
Yeah.
happening longer. Yeah.
And I tell, I work with a lot of men. And so I also say to them, you know what? And you can be a Brad, sir. So just simmer down. So it's not just us.
Right. I have a friend that calls that he uses Darren. So
See,
he has Karen and Darren. Yeah.
yeah, I like it. I might steal it.
So do it. So coaching with a Karen, yes, having that sense of humor is so critical. I feel like overall in society today, I'll make a very blanket, broad statement, but
Yeah.
man, could we inject a little bit of levity and a little bit of humor and maybe a little bit of self-deprecation into what we're doing on the whole?
It shifts
It's
things.
beneficial.
And I literally ask them, so I do a consultation typically to see if I can help, even if I can help people. And one of the questions I ask is, what are you willing to do? Right? Because willingness, I can't help somebody if they're not willing to do something differently.
Right.
And I ask them, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How fun are you? I've had a fire chief say, well, if you asked my wife, I said, oh, sir, if we asked your wife, she'd probably rate you -2. So let's just stay with how funny you think you are.
Right. That's funny.
Because I'm like, he's been married for decades, right? She's probably
Right,
heard
right.
every single joke and story. She's over him.
Mhm. Right, right. So I think that's good. So coaching with a Karen is usually with organizations, and rather than, so it's like an organizational coaching. It's not necessarily a one-on-one coaching.
Yes, and a lot of times
Okay.
I do trainings and then I
Mm-hmm.
teach spiritual principles because again, it's how are you connecting to your purpose and hopefully something bigger than your purpose. And then I give you actual tools. It's the foundation, right? We can always build off of that. But the three foundational principles I always recommend we start with because we're building your life, we're building your career. Oftentimes we're rebuilding it. But how do we make sure that the foundation is really secure? Because I don't care what you add to that. If you don't have a strong foundation, it's not going to be sustainable.
Correct. Yeah. If you don't have the strong foundation, you're either building a sandcastle or an ice sculpture, and neither are going to be there forever.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
how do we make sure that we understand what that looks like? And it's actual how to. So I marry the science with why this works and the benefits to it. And then how do you actually do it?
And what are those three principles?
So the first one is intention. And a
Okay.
spiritual intention, so I always say it's kind of like a goal or a mission statement, but typically those are organizational based. If
Right.
you look on everybody's website, it's about who you serve,
Hmm.
and this is about you. And there are four parts to this, and it's ask you to really think about going a little bit deeper. So like a lot of times we want money, right? I want money too. I love money. But sometimes I'm like, well, is it wealth, right? And as opposed to money, because money sounds
Right.
fleeting, but wealth sounds like we're building something solid and
Right.
legacy. And so that's really the first principle is when you get really clear on what you do, why you do it, and what we're going for, saying yes and no to things gets really easy.
Right.
The second thing is really gratitude. And I know we talk about that, but there is a way to practice gratitude. And I can tell you that it was hard for me when I started to practice gratitude. And now it's something I do every single day. And I do it
Hmm.
typically before I go to bed because I want to remember all of the great things that happened. Because sometimes it's hard for me to remember if I've got a shitty day, that's when it gets hard.
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
I can't think of one thing that I'm grateful for today. And I'm like, all right, you're going to bed. That may be it. Your pillow's soft. I'm like, we got to start basic.
I had one, Karen. I had a day similar, and I was like really digging, and I went, "I'm grateful I live in the age of Excedrin."
Yes.
And then that's what I came up with that day, and I called it good and kept going.
Yeah.
I'm happy I do. Happy
You
I
know,
live when Excedrin is a thing.
because it's really easy when things are going right. But when things aren't
Yes.
going right, and it really just shifts, and I want to sleep well, and
Right, right.
it is proven that if you practice gratitude, you will sleep better.
Yes.
And I will do anything for a good night's sleep. So I'm like, how do I make sure that I'm doing and maximizing my time and effort? Especially in first responder land, it's all about efficiency, right? We're making life and death calls. We
Life and
don't have
death.
room
Yeah.
for error. But most of us have really busy, full lives anyway. So let me make sure that I'm doing this to the most maximum efficiency. And so then the last one is hope. And I really love hope because I can tell you, I've had managers over the course of my sales career say hope is not a strategy.
I too have heard that. I have heard that many, many times.
Well, that's true. If you're hopeless, it's really hard to come back from that. And hope, we know if people are hopeful and practicing hope, you make more money.
Correct.
And it creates this place for you to, like I said, when you're in the suck. I know just like with my dad passed in 2024 and he was unwell for many years. And when he became hopeless, that's when I was like, it's really hard to come back from that. I can't help somebody that isn't hopeful, right? But I can't do that for you. And how do you, when again, we know our mindset in everything helps us weather the storms.
Correct.
So practicing hope, there's a study that came out in 2025 that really talked about how do we practice hope and all the benefits to that.
And it's critical that people hear these are skills you can learn. I don't care if your nickname was Eeyore since you were 4 years old and you think that's not possible for me. Yes, it is. It is a there are techniques and actual steps you can take that you can learn,
Yes.
and you can teach an old dog new tricks, and your
Yeah.
brain will support you in it,
And I
which is
and that's a great point, Bridget, because I just wrote about this. I do a blog and a newsletter every month, and the theme this month was about making sure that we understand soft skills. That's where it's at because right now with AI, everybody's kind of tripping out, right? Oh my God, the jobs are going to be taken and they're going to be taking
right.
over our lives. And I said, here's what I know. I was around for Y2K. We thought when the year
Yep,
2000 was going to come, the world was going to end. I'm like, I don't think that's true, but
right.
it's possible. And how do we continue, right? This is the most important thing is this conversation. This is never going to go away from us connecting to each other and those soft skills, right? The empathy and the communication. So I
Mhm.
really love, that you hit that on the really nailed that because it's like this is something that can be taught. So even if you're
That's right.
the most anti Gumby, that
Right.
you can learn this and it's never too late, right? You can always
That's right.
continuously improve.
Well, and the thing that I hear you say over and over is that science is finally catching up to the wisdom.
Yes. And
Science is catching up to the wisdom.
because what's old is what's new, and
Right.
that's sometimes what happens, right? We move away too far from the fundamentals. It goes back to the basics, right? If we don't have a strong foundation, if we are not practicing foundational things, and that could be our physical health, right? Just simple things like eating an apple instead of a donut, right? And we can
Right.
apply that to every area of taking care of ourselves. But sometimes we get off course. And so that's why as a coach, it's really helpful because oftentimes we wait until the train completely derails,
That's right.
and that's a hard fix.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so it is good when you have that someone by your side that is nudging, tweaking, reminding, shining a little light, casting a little shadow, getting it, like whatever's necessary to keep you closer to staying on the tracks and not just having the full derailment off a cliff because the bridge is out.
Yeah.
Let's avoid that if we can.
Yes. I just know that at one point I was in therapy and I had a coach. That's how well things were going.
Mm,
And I'm a big proponent for therapy. However, that's not my goal, right?
right.
I don't sit around going, gee, I can't wait till things get so bad that I can go back to therapy,
Right, right. Right. Yeah,
But if it's necessary, I will, right? But,
that's
it's
right.
how do I keep, so I referenced in 2024 with my dad. So he passed in January and then my closest friend died in November. And so 2024 was a rough one. I had a lot of grief and sadness. And so I started to do things that I typically don't do, but they were in my toolbox. Because I knew if
Right.
I did not have a place to put that grief and sadness, I would start to cope in unhealthy ways.
Mhm.
And I don't want to go back to doing that because I
No.
spent so much time undoing that.
Hmm.
So sometimes we just need somebody that can come in and hear what we're saying because oftentimes we don't even hear it. I say our speaking betrays us, right? Because sometimes I'll be like,
Yes.
and you're like, did I say that? And I'm like, yes. And that sometimes helps, right? So typically what I do is I work with folks about 6 months because that should give us enough time to really unpack some things, figure out our focus, and then hopefully you don't need me again, but we can always tag back in. And this also allows you time then to integrate the things that we've worked on because you've got to continue to just do that on your own. And then hopefully, like I said, we can always tag back in. Most of the times you got it. It's like I just
Right.
needed this little tweak.
Right. Well, I think that it's exciting that you're working in this new field and that there's this spiritual component to it as well as the practical.
Yes.
One of the things that you've done that we haven't even touched on yet, I don't know how we talked this long and I'm just now bringing it up, is that you also have put pen to paper and you are now an international best-selling author with your first book published.
Yes. Yes.
Tell us, how has that experience been, and what was it like to put your story on paper?
Uncomfortable is the word that comes to mind. I needed convincing, but it was also extremely cathartic and liberating. So it's funny because this morning, one of my close friends had purchased the book, and so she texted me that she's on a plane going, I'm not sure where, but she was reading it. And it's the first time that I know of anybody reading it. Known of people actually purchasing it, and I got into a sweat. I was like, "Oh, no." It's like so it's exciting, right? Because it really I reflected upon the last 10 years of where things started to change for me and how I got to this right now moment. Because oftentimes this doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Our lives
Right.
unfold over time. And so that's again another reason why I became a coach is because there's nothing wrong with you. We just sometimes need somebody to come in and get us to the next level.
Mhm.
And so that's where I work with people though that can smell you from a mile away, right? Their meter is really high. You have to be very authentic. I mean, they literally assess people for a living. So if I'm not
Right.
walking my talk, they can smell it.
Right.
So I'm like, guess what? I put all my stuff out there. So if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. Do you feel like this sparked an interest in possibly writing more?
That was always the intention, but I
Good.
needed the other thing I talk about in my work with folks is the 3-foot toss, because oftentimes we go really big and really hard, right? But it's these slow and to do this with these other brave women has been fun, and we're empowering each other. So I don't
Right.
know if I could have write the book that I know that's in me and coming if I didn't start off with these other people that are so brave and willing to share their stories with me.
Well, it's really remarkable, and it's had such a great response. I can't wait until you hear the feedback from your friend that's reading it on the plane.
Yes,
That will be interesting. And your book, it's currently available on Amazon,
absolutely.
coming out with an audiobook
Yes,
and paperback.
yes,
Six Figure Chicks,
yes,
Scottsdale Volume 2.
yes.
Mhm.
Six Figure Chicks, got Sale Volume 2. I'm in the process of recording the audio. I found that it's taking me longer than I thought because I'm uncomfortable with me reading it, in my own voice, but I'm doing it anyway. And then the hardbound version is going to be coming out.
With your own voice, do you struggle with not liking your voice
Yes.
on
I equate it to back in the day when we had answering machines and you would record your message and then it would play back and because it wasn't in a phone, it was literally out
right.
in your, wherever you
Little
had your
mini cassette
yeah.
tape. Yeah.
And I'd be
Right.
like, oh my God, do I sound like that? You don't hear your own voice in the same way. And people are like, yeah. And I'm like, that's not good.
Well, this has just been really exciting. I love this thought of breaking ground in a dynamic where it's been happening forever. So moral injury was happening forever. I'm just going to say recorded history, right? There's been whatever version it came up in throughout history. That's something that existed. But I don't believe it had a name that allowed it to be isolated and identified. And oftentimes something has to be identified in order to make progress or work with it.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, Karen, you're at the forefront of actually working with this, and it's going to have an impact. I believe it's going to have an impact both on individual humans, but also on group dynamics and on corporations themselves. So the entity itself is going to benefit when the leadership and the people that make up the corporation are able to build that stronger foundation, have better group dynamics, have better communication, and allow people to either assess if it's where they want to stay or not, and attract people that will be in alignment with the mission and the vision of whatever the entity is. So it's exciting to me that you are at the forefront of working with this. I feel like it's another component of leadership that has not been discussed or addressed in the C-suite that now can become a part of that.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, spiritual, right? When we hear that word, we kind of make up what that is for us. And the technology, I use a technology that is anonymous when I train. And so
Mhm.
when I did the training here in Arizona, it was really interesting. So one of the questions I ask is, when you hear the word spiritual, what do you think of? And they can anonymously through their phone type in what they think. When I did that training in Utah, it was very different because Utah is much more religious, right? We have the Church of Latter-day Saints. So especially in government, we're not sure, right? The division between church and state. So I really go to how religion is a way that you can practice your spirituality. Religion isn't necessarily spiritual, right? It can be. And I just had this conversation because I was at the Utah Chief of Police conference with one of the command staff there, and I said, especially with this younger generation, they are connecting in ways that we don't. So we have a crisis with people not wanting to work in the way that, I've been working since I was 12. I had a paper route.
Right, right.
That's not how this is going. So we're the most disconnected we've ever been.
Yes.
So I think for this younger generation, it is for them to connect with their purpose, but also some resiliency, right? Sometimes you do have to suck it up because people are going to hurt your feelings. They're going to say things you don't like. Sometimes you do have to do things because I said so.
Right, right.
You know, because I know for myself that if I'm aligned with the intention, and sometimes I've been in situations where I would have to I have a work intention and then I do a monthly intention just so that I can kind of see where I want my life to go in the next couple weeks. I had to read that work intention every single day before I started work because it was tough.
Right.
But when I reminded myself that this is not about me, I did it. And sometimes you have to do things to support yourself, to support your family. So this opting out and cancel culture isn't you can't just do that too.
Right, right. I mean, you can, but there's
Right.
gonna be the extreme situations and that you will be living with. So as long as you're okay with those,
Yeah. And
but
I'm like,
just
oh,
know that it's not there's not a magic having everything and doing little.
yes. And that's what I see is oftentimes we're like, well, we don't do that. I'm not doing that. Well, okay, then what are you going to do? Be unemployed?
Right.
Live in your parents' house for the rest of your life? I mean, that's an option, but is that really you know, what is best for
Your
us.
heart's desire.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Inner Estate. And I love whenever I get to learn about emerging concepts that impact leadership and mindset and self perception, whether for an individual, a group, or an entity. And with this moral injury progress that you're making, it is just really fascinating to me. So, Karen, thank you for sharing everything with us today.
Bridget, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun, and I hope I didn't swear a lot, but, that's
Ah, you did
sometimes
not. You did
okay.
not.
That's
You were not
some
the potty mouth.
yeah, that's
I
sometimes
didn't
the
have
hazard
to
of the job.
I didn't have to grab the swear jar tiki mug,
Ooh.
and you were fine. If you're listening to this episode of The Inner Estate and you'd like to reach out and learn more about what Karen's doing, coaching with a Karen or PIF Samaritan Services, all of her contact information will be wherever you're consuming this podcast. Karen, thank you. Listeners, thank you. Have a great day.